Hey guys, hope everybody is having a wonderful day thus far and that you have enjoyed what you've heard in film studies as we look at the beginning of film. Today we're going to be looking at the evolution of theaters and particularly the switchover, if you will, from the uncomfortable confines of the Nickelodeon to the movie palace. The advent of multiple reel feature-length films, meaning films that were longer than 10 to 15 minutes, like The Great Train Robbery. We're talking multiple reel films now that are what we would consider today feature-length films. The advent of multiple reel feature-length films was accompanied by a dramatic change in motion picture presentation as the uncomfortable small makeshift Nickelodeon gave way to luxurious movie palaces and other large theaters, especially built for the showing of motion pictures. Though the majority of movie theaters built in the 1910s and 20s tended to be modest in size, seating from around 500 to 800 spectators, more and more large movie palaces, seating from anywhere from 1,500 to over 6,000 spectators, were built in urban areas. Movie palaces boasting a palatial decor that ranged from the classical to the exotic provided, quote, an acre of seats in a garden of dreams, unquote. In contrast to the congestion and oppressive sense of city life experienced by urban residents outside the theater, inside the typical movie palace, customers enjoyed the luxury of spacious, stately surroundings and a staff of obliging theater attendants who sought to answer their every need. In a sense, these theaters were social safety valves in that the public could partake of the same luxuries as the rich. Guys, the class divide in the 1910s and 20s was vast. In our country, what we consider today to be the middle class was far smaller. We had a great number of working class people in this country and a large number of what we would call today upper middle to just straight up wealthy people. And there wasn't nearly as much in between as we have today. Wealth was not as equally distributed throughout society. So the fact that the working class could go and see a matinee, for 35 cents at a movie palace, and you're getting ready to hear about these and see why it would have been such a big deal, that was huge. The fact that the working class man could partake of the same luxuries as the wealthy, that is going to be really big. And you, for the price of, like I said, admission to a matinee, 35 cents, roughly on average, bought you what you had always dreamed of, which was for just a little while bathe in luxury. The era of the movie palace began in 1913 with the opening of the 2,460-seat Regent, the very first deluxe theater built expressly for showing movies in New York. The Regent, like the movie palaces that would follow it, featured a big Wurlitzer organ, an orchestra, a chorus, and/or opera singers, ushers to show patrons to their seats, and a lavish atmospheric interior. There is the Regent, and you can see that neoclassical architecture there, and it looks a great deal like something that would have come out of ancient Greece. Inside movie palaces, like the first one, the Regent, you had a vast seating area, comfortable chairs, plush surroundings. Many of these movie palaces were themed, as you'll see when we talk about Sid Grauman. But you see, just how spacious and luxurious. Look at the attention to detail inside the Strand. The 3,500-seat Strand at Broadway and 47th Street and the 1,900-seat Rialto on Times Square followed the opening of the Regent. By this time, the entertainment program of the movie had expanded to include, in addition to theater orchestra's overture and musical accompaniment of the silent feature, dancers, opera singers, and other performers in live skits. So when you went to a movie palace, guys, it wasn't just the movie you were seeing. You were seeing a potpourri of things that composed the entire program. And the idea was that you were to be transported sort of to this other world. You were immersed in theming. You were immersed in this environment that was supposed to kind of make you forget everything else that was maybe going on bad in your life and just take it all in. I mean, this was a really special big deal. Here we see the Strand over here on the left and the Rialto over here on the right. And these were really famous movie palaces with thousands of seats inside for eager patrons. Here you can see the interior of the Rialto in New York and the orchestra pit down here where my cursor is. And all of these beautiful chandeliers, the acoustics designed perfectly. These were so pretty. Here we see the orchestra pit. Again, this is the Rialto. And there would have been live skits. There would have been singing. There would have been overtures as people came in. Themes from the various movies would be played by the orchestra. This would just be like the Rockettes would perform often at many of these movie palaces in New York. So this was a really big deal. The film program had also evolved to consist not only of the feature film, but a newsreel and a comedy short as well. In fact, the feature presentation tended to occupy only about 68% of the entire program. By the time the 6,200-seat Roxy Theater was built, the art of exhibition had developed into a science with uniformed ushers and other theater personnel drilled in their duties like military cadets. So these people were trained to meet your every need. They were trained to wait on you and bring you anything that your little heart could desire, because they knew that if that theater didn't, another theater would. So they wanted to make sure you would be pleased and want to come back. And so in that sense, they were drilled like military cadets. Here's the Roxy in New York City, again built in 1927. And it would be a big 6,200 seat movie palace. And here's another shot of the Roxy, a artist depiction in New York City. This is the interior of the Roxy. You can see how massive it is. Look at the orchestra pit down here. My goodness. All kinds of space. The boxes, the staircases. They really do look palatial in that sense, don't they? In Los Angeles, Sid Grauman followed the example set in New York, launching a series of movie palaces that were each more lavish than the other. Instead of a variety of live acts to accompany the film like theaters in New York, Sid Grauman provided what was called the prologue, a show thematically related to the motion picture. So there's Sid Grauman, who made a couple things famous. His prologue, which was the show before the show, thematically related to what was going on. And he also made the hand and footprint ceremony in cement, most famously outside his Chinese theater, a movie palace that was built for, again, these various themes, Oriental, Moorish, all kinds of different themings. But out in front of the Chinese theater, he had this amazing idea to put people's movie stars' hand and footprint in stone and cement and cast it in stone there so it would last a really long time and people could come and see where the Hollywood stars did those things. Mary Pickford was sort of one of America's very first sweethearts. She was married to Douglas Fairbanks, and they were Hollywood's really first big power couple. But Mary Pickford was the very first to put her hand and footprints inside the cement. Sid Grauman's theater empire began with the $1 Million Theater 1917. Then the Egyptian, the Metropolitan in 1923, and Grauman's most famous theater, Grauman's Chinese Theater, in 1927, which was the last of his big movie palaces. As the names Egyptian and Chinese suggest, a number of movie palaces of the 1920s adopted exotic architectural styles, employing Oriental, Hindu, Italian, Persian, Moorish, or Spanish decor to create a romantic atmosphere in which audiences could consume on-screen fantasies. And there it is, his famous Chinese Theater, the most famous of all the movie palaces. And like many of Grauman's theaters, it was, of course, themed, and in this case, the Oriental decor that so characterized this architectural marvel. There it is in 1927 when it opened. Look at all the old Model A's and Model T's there. That is so cool. People you can see looking around, looking down at the hand and footprint imprints there in the cement of famous stars like Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. Here you see an advertisement. Grauman's Chinese Theater, an international institution presenting world premieres of the greatest productions with Sid Grauman's famous prologues. So the show before the show is what he made very famous. Here you can see some of the ones out in front of the Chinese Theater. And this is he himself in 1946. Left his hand and footprints in the cement there in front of his theater as a little lasting imprint of all the things he had done for the film exhibition industry. Here you see a little picture from the very first hand and footprint ceremony, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, and Sid Grauman there capturing those images in cement. Here we see some other ones. Shirley Temple, we're going to be talking about her in a little while. And Joey Brown, famous comedian. I like how he put mouth print there. That's so funny. Freddie Bartholomew, a very famous child star. And of course I had to put my very favorite actor of all time on here, John Wayne. And he left his cowboy boot prints and a fist print there, which is, of course, John Wayne was the tough guy. So he left a fist print in the cement there. And if you go to Disney's Hollywood Studios, there is an exact replica of Grauman's Chinese Theater there. It used to house the Great Movie Ride, which was one of my favorite attractions until it was replaced by Mickey's Runaway Railroad that opened earlier this year before the plague broke out with COVID. But that was one of my all-time favorite attractions that featured all kinds of audio animatronics as you journeyed through the history of Hollywood. But it's sadly no longer there. Still, the replica of the Chinese Theater is. And Disney also had celebrities leave their hand and footprints in cement out in front of that one. Theater magnates A.J. Balaban and Sam Katz built movie palaces of their own in Chicago, following the major routes of urban mass transit lines. This put their theaters within reach of a growing urban middle class. They built the 2,400-seat Central Park Theater in 1917, both the 4,700-seat Tivoli Theater and 3,900-seat Chicago Theater in 1921, and the 4,000-seat Uptown Theater in the mid-20s. Here you can see the Tivoli and the Chicago movie palaces along mass transit lines like railroads, subways, etc., so that people could go right from the transportation into the movie palace. Here's the interior of the Uptown Theater in Chicago. You are probably beginning to notice a trend of the lavish interiors of the movie palaces. And here we see the illuminated, beautiful Chicago Theater, a grand Chicago movie palace as presented by Balaban and Katz. And I want you to take note of those two words right there, air conditioned. Guys, air conditioning was a luxury, very, very, very expensive. Balaban and Katz had air conditioning installed in all of their movie palaces, which of course gave them a great edge over the competition. And you can imagine hardworking people during the summer months that would pay their money just to go in and even if they fell asleep, even if they weren't interested in watching the movie, just to lie there in comfort during the horrible humidity of summer, lying there in the darkness with the cool air-conditioned breeze, just sort of lulling them into relaxation. Here you can see an advertisement here. There's an acre of seats, the Uptown Theater. Drop everything and be there when the doors open of the Uptown Chicago Movie Palace. In addition to the mighty Wurlitzer organs, full orchestras, and live stage shows, Balaban and Katz theaters provided, listen to this, guys, patrons with free child care, attendant smoking rooms, foyers and lobbies lined with nurses and mothers' helpers that took care of the children of patrons in the theater basement, which was equipped like neighborhood playgrounds with slides, sandboxes, etc. At the same time, starting in 1921, as I mentioned, their theaters also had air conditioning, giving them a crucial advantage over the competition throughout the summer months. So there was literally no reason why you couldn't go. They took care of everything. People to watch the kids while mom and dad went to go to the movie, all kinds of perks and amenities, including air conditioning. Noting the success of the Balaban and Katz theaters in Chicago, Paramount joined forces with that organization and put Sam Katz in charge of all Paramount theaters. As a result, the model for movie palaces developed by Balaban spread to the circuits of other major studios as well, becoming the standard used by the entire film industry. Guys, we have our own movie palace right here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and if you haven't been there, you've missed out on a great opportunity to see a great, big, beautiful movie palace, a 20s era movie palace that features many of the same things: the lush, plush interiors, the beautiful seats, the balconies, the chandeliers. It went through a big refurbishment about 15 years ago and looks very, very similar to the way it did in the 1920s. Here you can see this is what it looked like before the grand reopening. And one of the things, this is the interior of the Tennessee, one of the things that I absolutely love when I go is watching the big Wurlitzer organ circled here come up out of the floor and play music thematically associated with the movie itself. And it's just such a treat and so special to go. It just feels so classy and so nice. And a poor person like me can enjoy the luxuries of the rich, just like the people did in the 1920s. Isn't that beautiful? We're so lucky to have that in Knoxville. I've watched many plays there. I've watched many movies. The Tennessee Theater will often show films during summer film festivals, and you can go. I've watched everything from Gone with the Wind there to James Bond movies to Hitchcock movies. I've watched so many movies there. There is nothing like going to the Tennessee Theater to watch a movie. I've even had students before get jobs there as ushers, and they have Mr. Harned, Mr. Harned, and it's always nice when my students. I had one student I've never identified shout to me. They were up here in the balcony, and I was down here somewhere. I heard Mr. Harned, and I could never see who it was. So it was somebody yelling at me trying to get my attention. There's the big Wurlitzer. Isn't that pretty? That's just absolutely beautiful. I know that the chancellor of the University of Tennessee, longtime chancellor of the University of Tennessee, actually used to be the gentleman who would play the organ as it came up out of the ground. I'm not sure if he still does that or not, but it was so cool. With the construction of theaters, especially designed for the exhibition of motion pictures, the shift from one-reel films to the new phenomenon of the feature-length film that presented narratives and characters as sophisticated as those found in other typically middle-class forms of representation, and the development of a habitual movie-going audience composed of a broad spectrum of the general public, the basic elements of the cinematic institution fell into place. So guys, we've got everything we need. We got the people to make the movies. We got big, long, feature-length films now. And instead of the old Nickelodeons, we've got beautiful, brand-new movie palaces bathing people in luxury to sit back in that nice, comfy chair and air conditioning if you went to a Balaban and Katz Palace to watch these movies. We've got everything we need now to take filmmaking and exhibition to that next level. And I hope that you enjoyed our presentation today. And if you will go ahead and submit those notes to me once you have completed those. And I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.